everyone, and welcome to the first weekly episode of the Becoming Women podcast with me, your host, Ella Sims, where each week I speak with inspiring women about their teenage years. If this is your first time listening, a very warm welcome to you, and if you're a regular listener, then thank you. My mission with this podcast is to support teenage girls as they navigate the ups and downs of growing up. In each episode, I talk with grown women about their individual journeys as a teenager, the highs and lows, any challenges they may have faced, and what advice they would share with their younger self, to help reassure you that you are not alone and those tricky teenage years will pass. On today's episode, I am with Maddy Lawson, a coach, writer, and curator of slow living retreats and gatherings. Inspired by nature and the changing seasons, Maddy helps wild-hearted creative women bring more meaning and purpose to their work and lives. She believes that adventures come in many forms, whether at home or in the wild, and that it's often the simplest of things that make us truly happy. Episode of Becoming Women, I have a very close friend of mine, Maddy.
That's me.
While we've known each other for years, I don't think we've ever delved into our lives as a teenager, and so I'm really looking forward to our conversation today and hearing about your experiences. But also I wanted to add as well that it's really important to me to mention this because what you're doing now has really inspired me to embarking on doing my own thing, and yeah, I wouldn't be sat here with you today doing this, so I must thank you for that.
Oh, yay.
So maybe it would be good to start talking about your childhood and your family background, just to kind of give a general overview.
Oh, it's going to get all psychological. I didn't have any problems, I don't think, like as a child, not in the kind of typical way. I had a really happy childhood. I'm an only child. I grew up with my parents and I saw my grandparents a lot. They looked after me a lot in holidays and things and when I was little. It was happy, it was great. I had a lot of friends, I think, like all through childhood when I was in primary school and when I was in secondary school. I always had good friends, and I have a big extended family with lots of cousins and things, so I always had kind of brother and sister type figures. So I don't think I was ever an only child in the sense that I was like lonely and locked in an attic somewhere and on my own. It was nothing like that. It was nothing sad or miserable, but I did spend time on my own because my parents both worked long hours, and so also they'd have work to do on the weekend, or they'd have something sometimes, so I'd end up kind of playing by myself, and I think that made me quite like resourceful and I think quite creative because I guess when you've got brothers and sisters, I don't know because I don't have that experience, but you always have someone to talk to, and therefore maybe you would just sit around and talk, or you might play a game that was like quite active, whereas for me it was like I didn't have that, so I would do something like painting or drawing or writing. And I think now that's kind of made me quite an introvert in the sense that I'm not shy, but like I need that time alone. I think that's kind of that space to explore your own things, think about things, or even act on something. Like I get tired, I think, if I'm around too many people for too long. I think that's classic introvert thing, is that the way you fill up your energy is alone, and you enjoy maybe being with other people, but it kind of drains you more than it fills you up. I don't know, it must have come from that, I suppose, and I guess those early years sort of do define how you become, like personality wise. Yeah, definitely. And my parents are like that as well, like they're both quite again, not introverted, but they like time alone. Yeah. And so as a family, I think we're just I was never going to be like life and soul of the party, but And was that the same for you at school then, or did you have a group of friends? No, at school I think I was always quite sociable. I don't know, the girls I grew up with might say differently, but I think again it was always a balance of like they would know if I was kind of tired of being kind of in too much company, or like at a party or something, I would sort of be like, I'm just going to go outside for a bit, or when you've had enough. They would know that it wasn't necessarily me being sad or miserable, but that I just needed some quiet space, I think.
Yeah.
I always found parties, I think, a bit overwhelming, just
Yeah.
with like so many people and so much stuff going on, and I don't know, just a bit too much. Like I was never the person that would stay like till the very end. It was always kind of like, it's my bedtime now. So I don't think I was like very exciting. I was not a wayward child in any way. But yeah, I had close friends, and I think I've always been much more of a kind of a small, close group of friends, rather than social chameleon, loads of friends. But yeah, I've always had good friends, so I wasn't a loner, I don't think.
I wouldn't say you're a loner. But I think it's interesting how when you're younger, those sort of personality traits that you have kind of remain the same. You don't make a polar opposite switch of being someone who likes being on their own and then all of a sudden you have to be the life and soul of the party.
Yeah, not if it came from a place of enjoyment, I don't think. Like if it was always how you wanted things to be and you were happy with that, then I think that's totally true. But I guess there could be ways where if you had an unhappy childhood where you didn't feel like you fitted in, or you wanted friends but didn't have them, then I can see why when you grow up, maybe you might find like your right people and then come more out of your shell, I think. Maybe. Yeah.
And what about school? What was that like? What kind of school did you go to?
I love school. I was a massive nerd. I went to a private school, an all-girls school in Oxford, and I loved it. It was kind of very academic, I think, an environment, but it was also fiercely feminist. Right. So it was kind of, we had a head teacher who sort of looked like she belonged in the mafia. She was really stylish, really, like chic and very manicured, very polished, very well put together. Yeah. And just an amazing businesswoman and leader for the school. And I think everyone was a little bit scared of her, but she kind of made sure that the message of the school was that you could sort of do anything you wanted, and that being a girl wasn't a drawback. It was, something that made you almost more powerful, I think, and that there were ways that, no, that sounds really wrong, like ways that you could use your femininity. I don't mean it in that way, but like ways that being a woman was a strong suit rather than a negative point, and that they worked really hard, all the teachers in the school, to kind of make sure that we knew that we had kind of almost limitless potential and that we could explore whatever we wanted to do. And
that's great.
So I think I loved it. I really thrived in that academic space, I think, and thrived on achievement, I think, and sort of doing well, and that's what motivated me and kept me going. And it was all good. I didn't have any bad experiences. It was kind of stressful, I guess, at times, I think, when there's a lot of pressure for exams and getting certain grades, and you kind of know that your school and your parents and even your friends, I guess, expect certain things of you, because we were all kids who did well. Like that was how the school worked, It had a very academic reputation, so there wasn't really anyone who was sort of struggling. So I think there is a pressure to kind of maintain that reputation, and that is almost on your shoulders, that you can't let anyone down. But I don't think I felt that at the time. I think it's looking back that I see that, rather than at the time. Like I felt pressure, I guess, but it was more like it felt like pressure from me, that you sort of want to do well, and you almost have to do well because that's who you are and that's what you do. And so it never felt seriously negative. I think there were times when I was stressed or tired, but not in a way that I resented, just in a way that that's how life was. And but I do see now that it's not necessarily the healthiest way to grow up.
How did you handle those periods where it was a bit more stressful, if you're working on an essay deadline or an exam?
I think again it was just being by myself. Like I could never work in groups. Like there were study groups and things, but I just got too distracted. I was the chatty one, so I was sort of I'd be talking to people, or I don't know, I can't focus, I don't think, when there's too many distractions. And I guess again that's just growing up, getting used to being in your own space, that I sort of need to be able to like really zone in on what I'm doing. So I would just shut myself in my room, I guess, and work for as long as I could, until my parents were like, no, you have to have dinner now.
Stop.
Definitely the person with the highlighters and the coloured pens, I think quite visually.
Yeah.
So I think I was always that person who was like making little charts and little boxes, and that was how I learnt stuff. Just making sure, I guess, I had a balance of what I was doing. So I don't think I wasn't that good at that myself, but my parents were very good, I think, at telling me when I'd been doing something for too long, or like that I should go outside. And I have my dad is like very outdoorsy, so he would kind of be like, we're going for a bike ride, or we're going for a walk. And I think having that almost at the time, even if I felt like I was being sort of forced to do it, I enjoyed it. I always loved it when I got out and did it, but at the time if you're a bit like, oh dad, I don't want to go for a walk. But I think that really gives you headspace, and I think again I've taken that with me into adulthood now, is that almost a need to be outside. Like when things feel too much, I think it's just getting more perspective, I think, and seeing the world outside your bedroom, or outside wherever you're studying, the library.
Yeah, I think at that age as well, you're not necessarily sat there thinking, okay, I need to step away now and take a break. And I guess that's the role of a parent or a guardian, or whoever's taking care of you, to make sure that you give yourself that space from your studies.
Yeah, I think especially when there is so much pressure on kids to do well and work hard and all those things that you're told, I think, like you say, you feel like almost that you can't take a break because that's not what you should be doing. You need to study in all available hours. So I think it is really important to try and have some balance, even if it's not going outside, but it's reading a book that's not related to work, or watching a movie, playing with your dog, doing anything just for an hour or something, I think can really help you.
And I wanted to ask you actually, and I didn't note it as a question, but just thinking about it now, I know you have talked in the past a little bit about being a perfectionist. Where do you feel like that came from?
My parents. If they listen to this, they're going to cringe. But I think it's just growing up with two people who really are really intelligent, really, really driven, really well qualified in so many ways, well travelled. That means that they like things just so, they came to really have expectations, I guess, for me, because they have high expectations of themselves. And I don't think they ever deliberately put them on me, to cause me any difficulty. It was always done from a place of love, like never had anything but love and support from my parents. But I think subliminally, I guess you do just expect from your child what you expect of yourself. And if when their standards are so high, I think that meant for me, I didn't want to disappoint them in any way. And again, it was all subliminal. I never felt that pressure, I don't think. But I just knew that I wanted to do as well as I could for me, for them, for the future, for everything. And I think, it got too much, I think, towards when I was a bit older, not necessarily at school, but towards university. It was just too much. Like, just everything had to be like, it was rubbish unless it was perfect. But there's no such thing as perfect. That's when you will keep working and working and working, and you'll never get anything done because you're waiting for the moment when you're like, yes, it's perfectly polished. And things would take me so long, just to write like a paragraph of an essay. Every word had to be sort of the right word, and I wouldn't be happy with it unless, I don't know, like I say, you never feel that something's perfect, but unless it was as close to perfect as I felt that it could be, it just wasn't good enough. And like that's when it's damaging, I think, when it goes too far. And I think that's what I meant when I said earlier about how I realised looking back that my school environment, I think, and the way that I grew up being so academic kind of influenced me in a more negative way. I think the perfectionism side of it, it's really hard to get rid of once it's there, I think.
It's sort of set in your bones almost.
Yeah, because obviously everyone wants things that they do to be as good as it can be, but I think some people just have a sensible level of knowing when like good enough is enough, and there's a phrase that I just always tell myself now, which is done is better than perfect, because with my work now, brilliant. if it's not done, as in if it's not out there, no one else can see it, so it's not even real. Like if I'm not telling anyone about what I'm doing because I'm waiting for that moment, I'm never gonna achieve anything because I'm just waiting all the time. So that's what I tell myself now. But it's taken a lot of work to get to that point. I think it's all wrapped up in a lot of anxiety that came with it. But that's kind of a whole other story. I don't know if we want to go into it or
not. We can. This is what it's for.
I think, I don't know, was there something you were going to ask me?
So I wanted to touch on personal challenges. So I don't know.
That was it. Yeah, that was it. That's what I was saving it for.
Okay.
It's sort of, again, it's not a challenge of my childhood, I'd say. Mm-hmm. Because as the picture I've painted so far shows you, it was all pretty rosy. But it was, I think people who struggle with perfectionism or any kind of desire to achieve, kind of like a high achiever, I think, you don't notice that it's a problem until something disrupts the pattern, I think. So if you're always achieving, it's always reinforcing that it feels right and that it's fine and that you're doing well, even if it's hard work, even if sometimes it feels like a struggle. That kind of, I don't even know if it's a chemical thing, you know, like serotonin, or I don't know, I'm not a sciencey person, but you know, when they say, you know, you have chocolate and it does something in your brain and it makes you happy, I think people get that from achieving things. I think there's and that thing that happens, whether it's in your heart, your brain, whatever you want to call it, just tells you like, oh yeah, I did the right thing, like that feels good. The fact that I got that grade, I got that little green tick, I got that A, that feels good. That's what I did all that for, and then it's worth it. So it kind of just keeps you in the same cycle and you keep going. But I think it's when something gets in the way of that and everything goes a bit wrong, that then you just don't know what to do. So I went from school to university, and that was fine. I did really well at university when I did my undergrad degree, and I graduated at the top of my class. And again, it was like, well, that's what all that hard work was for, and that's why I'm here. And I had a clear plan of what I wanted to do with my life. And then it was the time I met you when we were doing our masters. Something just wasn't right about the course for me. I couldn't get the grades that I was used to getting, and I just didn't understand any of it, and I don't know what it was, because obviously other people on the course found it fine and did fine, but for me it just wasn't suited to me. I don't think it was that overnight I magically lost my ability to, you know, be good at work. It just didn't click. And then I just felt like, who am I? Like, obviously you go from getting really good marks to just feeling completely stupid because you think, why can't I do what they can do? Or like, what's wrong with me? And I think I came to realise that, not at that point, but afterwards, after a lot of time of kind of thinking about it, that I'd come to associate or measure all my self-worth, I think, on those achievements. And it's at that point that you realise how dangerous that is when you can't get those achievements for whatever reason. You know, it could be illness or something could happen, and you just can't measure your whole life on grades. It doesn't make sense. And so I think that happening, and I almost had to fail in a way at something to realise how unhealthy, I think, and how unhelpful in a way it is to kind of associate your worth with those kind of achievements. You need more than that. And I still don't think I've quite worked out what it is that you need to replace it with, but you need more than that, because otherwise if it disappears, you've got nothing left. And it's not true. It's just absolutely not true that someone's worth is tied up with their academic achievements, or even their, you know, achievements in terms of how much money they make, or any kind of achievement. And I think that really made me question like what success really is. Because you obviously come to associate it with something that is relevant for you. So someone might think of it as making money, someone else might think of it as being famous, someone else might think of it as academic achievements. It does make you, if anything goes wrong in any of those areas, it really makes you reevaluate what success even is.
The piece that you wrote when you first started A Slow Adventure really, really moved me, and I definitely want people who listen to this to read it if they haven't already, because it is really inspiring, and you do touch on some of these things that you've talked about.
I think that's the thing, is that it makes you realise maybe that you'd never even really question what would make you happy. Like, not what would make you successful, but what would make you happy. And I guess that's kind of what I've replaced the idea of academic achievements with, is like just how happy I feel. And I think that's really underrated as a concept in society. I think the idea of just doing something because it makes you happy is treated as a really trivial thing, or something that's just a bit shallow, or like a bit, it's not important, and we should all put our happiness aside and sacrifice it for the sake of our work or our family or whatever. But I don't think you can be the best version of you if you're not happy. I was on the path to being a curator, as someone who works in museums, and that's what I wanted. I really felt that in my heart, but I didn't realise how I'd come to make that decision, I think, because you're so channeled by school and by society in general to kind of pick what you want to do. You don't know, I don't think. When you're that young, you really don't know. So it's just like, oh, I'm good at this and this. So what does that add up to? You know, it's almost just like picking ingredients and then seeing what cake you can make with them. And for me, it was an art history cake. So
yeah, I think it's quite difficult if you're not someone who's already set on becoming a doctor or a vet or a lawyer, and you love, especially creative or arts-based subjects, and you're at that junction in your life where you've got to decide after your A-levels that you're going to go to university what it is that you want to study. So then you kind of pick something out of, not thin air, that's probably a bit too broad.
You do the best with what you've got, that's the thing. I mean, we did the same subject, so what made you pick it?
So my A-levels were in English, literature, arts and religious studies, and I thought, what includes all of those three? And I came to art history.
That's the same as me.
And I loved a family holiday to Florence and all the museums we went to. So,
the same. I had art, English and French and an AS in history. It's, you know, languages, art, literature, you know, it's the same thing. You just take all of those individual parts and try and see what they relate to, I think. But in doing that, it feels like what you want, but you realise later, I think, that you never had any kind of external factors to bring into it. No one really told me what jobs were out there. So like we had careers advice, and there was this big book in the library that was like a list of careers, but it wasn't literally a list of all the careers in the world. And so many careers that exist today with doing things like social media, they didn't exist. Like, they weren't jobs. You know, if you told someone when we were growing up, like, oh, I'm going to make money on Instagram, firstly, Instagram didn't exist. But secondly, if you described it, people would have laughed at you because they'd be like, what? That's not a thing.
So what would you, if we've got listeners hearing our conversation now and thinking about this themselves, what if you were at that stage now, or if you were speaking to someone who was at that point in their life, what kind of advice would you give them?
Just to talk to as many people as possible, I think, because I didn't have a wide enough circle to draw from. I don't think I had my parents, my school, my friends, but they're all of the same type of people. You know, they're all high achieving, academically minded people who would consider, I guess, more traditional roles. And so that was my world, that I had to be like, okay, these are the jobs available to me. I should pick one of these and aim for them. I think that's what I mean about getting channeled on a path that maybe you don't question until later, because it's when you get to later, wherever that may be, whether it's, you know, you change school at sixth form to go to college, or you go to university, or in your first job, or you get a job while you're at school and you meet new people. It's being in one of those new environments where someone else might tell you about something that you're like, what? So I think the advice is definitely just talking to people, getting a job if you can, and trying things out. Even if it's a Saturday job, I think, just if there's something that sounds interesting to you, whether it's working in a florist's or at a radio studio or whatever you would call it, something, getting some work experience. Don't just wait until school tells you, okay, it's work experience week, and just try things out, because it's only by trying things out that you're even going to know whether it works for you.
Did you do anything?
No. Because again, it was a matter of being like, okay, now's the time to do work experience. And I had a Saturday job through most of, I don't know, maybe from year 11 and all the way through sixth form. But it didn't really cross my mind to try out different jobs, because I think because I'd always been fed that kind of type of job that you needed qualifications to do, so I didn't feel like there was anything that I could have tried. Because it was sort of waiting until you've got your A-levels and then you've got your degree, and that's when you do internships. So I do think anything that sounds interesting, even if you just talk to someone who does it, you don't necessarily have to work there, but go into the florist and say, you know, what's it like working here, or would you mind, could we arrange to have a chat? I think it's really interesting how something can throw you off your path and then actually suddenly you find yourself on the one that you were always meant to be on.
The right one.
Yeah, and that's the name of my business. That's why it's called A Slow Adventure, is because of this idea that it might take you a really long time to get to where you're meant to be, but you probably will end up there, or that deep down you know where it is you're aiming for. You just maybe need a little help reading the map, or you get a bit lost along the way. And I think that's what I really wanted to encapsulate in the idea of it, is that idea of helping other women on their journey, I think, and figure out, if they do reach a fork in the road, or they do reach some place where they feel lost, they can see which path they want to take, because I wish I'd had that help, I think. But I think when the people around you come from a very kind of traditional place of thinking, there isn't necessarily someone who'll guide you in a more alternative direction, because they have no experience of that. And so maybe it seems like dangerous, or not necessarily physically dangerous, but financially insecure, or it seems scary.
Yeah, there are potentially too many cons or risks.
Yeah, risks, exactly, I think. And so people wouldn't necessarily advise you to go in that direction. So for me, it's about trying to create an environment in which people can talk about that, women especially, talk about other ways of doing things, I think, and feel like it's okay and that you're not weird for wanting to do something a bit different. And
do you have any thoughts on the pressures that teenagers, especially girls, have today?
So many thoughts.
So many opinions.
And so much pressure.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. I think I look at me now and I see how much time I spend looking at a screen and scrolling through social media and comparing myself, even subconsciously, to other women, other lifestyles, most of which that you see on social media aren't even real. They've been enhanced in some way.
Whether they're an ad of some sort,
and I think about me doing that and how hard and upsetting I find it sometimes. And then I think about someone half my age going through the same thing, because they are doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
How ill-equipped I would have been to deal with that at that age, and how I imagine, I don't know, I think when you're younger, you don't have the life experience to put things into context, and you don't necessarily look at things and say, oh, well, that's an ad, they're being paid to do that, or that's been edited, or you can't necessarily see those things. You take things at face value, because that, that's just, it's what's in front of you, so you accept it for what it is. And I can only imagine that just sinking into girls' consciousness and what that's doing, and how hard it is when you don't have the life experience to know that something's fake, or that something doesn't matter as much as it seems it does. So I think being bombarded with that every day is just, I don't know, it's just horrendous. And social media can be so good in so many ways. It can connect you with so many communities of like-minded people. It's a huge part of my work now, but I do find I have to be really careful with how I use it. And again, I think when you're younger, maybe you don't have that awareness of the best ways to use it. But there's so many ways that girls are pressured now. I think the idea of just what it is to be a woman in itself, it's the perfection thing again. It's this image of like the perfect woman that you see still from women's magazines that I don't even know how they still exist. And I think they are changing. I think the number of kind of independent magazines you see coming up, especially ones that I've worked with over the past few years, are much more less focused on women as like objects to look at, and much more about who they are and what they do, and things that aren't even related to people in general, but features about the world, and travel and lifestyle and more different ways of doing things. But they do exist still, the glossy women's magazines, and I guess people still read them. I haven't picked one up for years, but I still see them there, and seeing that perfect woman kind of smiling at you from the front cover is like a constant reminder of what's expected of us. I think it's a huge amount of pressure, and I don't know what you can do about it really, other than just try to ignore it, because it's just present everywhere. And I don't know what the best approach is to block it out, I think, other than surrounding yourself with people who don't believe those things, looking for other role models who are different kinds of women, whether it's someone who works in a field that you're interested in, or someone who's simply a really nice person, just someone in your life, or in a book, or a real person. I think that's the thing, it's just keeping in your mind what the difference is between a real person and these edited images that we see that aren't really anything more than images, because they're not real people. Because I think if you met the real people in real life, you'd find that they're actually real people too. It's just the pictures of them you see make it not look that way. I think social media especially just makes you always want more. Like, it's just this culture of kind of always wanting more.
Yeah. Well, we consume so much already, and then it just means that it's like a window, isn't it? But the view is just the whole world, so you can see anything and everything, and then that opens your mind and your brain to so many different options that you probably wouldn't organically consider.
Exactly. And I think that's the big difference between our childhood growing up and now, is that we didn't have that. So your world was just your little world. You know, you'd have your back garden, and you'd have the park, and you'd have school.
Were you on anything? Because there was MySpace and MSN.
I never had MSN, because for the longest time we had like still a dial-up computer at home. You know, the one that's like like makes the noise for like 3 hours before you can do anything. And so my time on the computer was very much for like doing my homework. And if my dad
the 50p that goes in the jar towards it.
Oh, I never had that. That sounds like a good idea. But if my dad came home from work and wanted to make a phone call, and he picked up the phone and got that noise, you know, all hell would break loose.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I don't think I maybe joined MySpace in sixth form, but I don't remember anything about it, so I don't think I used it very much. But Facebook came out, I think, in my last year of sixth form. But again, it wasn't like a massive thing. I don't think it didn't really take over your life. It wasn't until I was at university, I think, that it kind of was an ever-present thing where you had to be on Facebook and
uploading pictures from the night out before.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you would literally walk into your dorm room and post the pictures
exactly from your camera
at 3 a.m.
So it involved getting cables and actually it was a lot more effort than it is now. But no, growing up it was just your physical world around you was the world, that you weren't constantly bombarded with images of other things that you could have. And so I think now you do just look at things and you feel bad. It's just a culture of nothing is ever good enough. And I think that's really dangerous, because I think you just lose the ability to be happy with what you have. So I think that's a big part of what I do now with the kind of slow living side of things, is just being happy with life as it is and doing what you can with the little moments, because they are your life, you know, those little everyday things.
So I was going to move on to a fun quick fire.
Okay.
If you're ready for it.
I'm scared.
Teen crush. Did you have one? Who was it?
I had several. Leonardo DiCaprio, classic.
Oh, that's the second time that's come up. Love it.
He still has my heart, I have to say. And Will Young.
Yes.
And I was crushed when I found out that I was never going to be able to marry Will Young. Not just because it was unlikely in the first place, but because he was in fact gay.
Yeah.
I still love him too. But yeah, I remember being very disappointed that day.
Yeah. Love it. We haven't really talked about relationships during this conversation, I've realised. But first kiss, how old and where?
I actually have no idea where. Like,
okay.
Not because there were so many of them that I don't remember.
It's that bad.
But it was with my first boyfriend, who I didn't have until I was 17.
Okay.
I just didn't. I guess being in an all-girls school, my access to boys was fairly limited. But I also wasn't interested in dating really until I was older. But yeah, anyway, my first boyfriend, he was my first kiss, but I couldn't tell you where. It was probably on one of our first dates, I imagine. Which probably would have been hanging around in Oxford somewhere outside HMV, which is where all the cool kids went. I don't know.
Not around the back of HMV.
No, nothing seedy like that, but in the street for everyone to tut at, probably.
And what about period?
Again, I don't know. I was at secondary school, and I remember the day it happened, because my dad was actually taking me to the dentist.
Oh.
And I remember it happening right before I was due to leave school to go to the dentist, and just thinking how this was like the worst timing ever.
You got the dentist and the period.
And my dad. And I remember just not wanting to like embarrass him. Like, not that I didn't want to talk to him about it, but just I didn't want to put him in a position of having to be the one that like sorted me out. And so I don't know. I think I must have been about 14 or 15. I don't know. It wasn't super early.
Okay.
Probably younger than 15. Probably 14. Yeah. And I don't think I was like put off by it really. I wasn't fazed by it because I think if you're taught well at school, most of us know it's coming, and it's more the inconvenience and just the like, oh, good day for this to happen.
Never. Yeah, I don't think for anyone it was the right time.
No.
Or the right place.
No, exactly. I mean, there probably isn't one, and I guess you're just like in the bathroom, but...
So I have 2 final questions to ask you, and the first one is just, I guess, looking back on your years growing up and knowing what you know now and what you've experienced, what would you advise your younger self?
I would say have more fun, I think, in the sense that just not to take everything so seriously. Yeah. So not necessarily like wild parties or bunking off from school, nothing like that, but just to treat everything a bit lighter. And I guess to go with that, to live in the moment, and be grateful for every day. So it's hard, I think, at the time if you're struggling with something, but always just looking for the good thing of that day, and realizing that it will all go by, which you never do when you're a kid, but that it will all go by really quickly.
Yeah. And
that you'll never have another chance in your life really when you can just hang out with your friends all the time, and you can sort of...
That's so true.
...have free time without, when school is finished, after you've done your homework, that's it. You haven't really got anything else to worry about. And that you should really relish that, because I don't think... the older you get, the less of that you have. Like, I don't think now I ever have a moment when I sit down and have nothing on my mind.
Or you finish your day at 3:30.
Yeah, exactly. And how much in the summer, especially, you can get done between 3:30 and 7 or 8 or whenever it is. You'd have to come home.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of other things that I thought of.
Yeah, go for it.
Which was know that failing isn't the end.
Yeah.
I think, because for me, until I hit that point where I realised that it was always, I can't fail.
Yeah.
Like, it's not an option to fail. Yeah. So I think knowing that you can fail, and knowing that life will carry on afterwards, and that in fact sometimes you need to fail, and that it can be a learning opportunity rather than the end of the world, and to grow from it, and that it's a positive thing sometimes, like obviously not all the time, but I think failure has always been a kind of a bit of a dirty word that, again, I think now is changing a little bit, and people are talking about it more. Like Elizabeth Day talks about it more. Yeah. And it's being opened up to...
It's almost being celebrated.
Yeah, but I think it should be, because if I hadn't failed, again in inverted commas, doing my masters, I would not be doing what I'm doing now, and it feels like absolutely the right thing to be doing, but I wouldn't have had the chance to consider it. So sometimes it's really true that the closing of one door opens another. And that can be the case with failing, I think, at something, is that it opens opportunities to do it again and better, or go in a different direction. And also just embracing the thing that makes you different, or even like acknowledging the thing that makes you different, accepting it. Yeah. Because I think when you're surrounded by other people at school, as you always are, it's so easy to get swept along with the crowd and do what they do and think what they think. But I think actually when you stop and just take a quiet moment, you know what you really think. Yeah. And so just to listen to that voice and what it's telling you, and treat her, the voice inside you, with kindness, and love that person. Yeah. And listen to them, because they know what's right for you. They know what you want to do, really. So just to accept that and know that being different is a good thing often.
Yeah. I really like that. That's excellent. How many was that? 4 or 5?
Yeah, a handful of advice.
A nice package.
Bits.
It's great. Okay, and if you could gift teenage girls all over the world with anything, what would that be?
The ability, again, to know and accept who they really are, and to know that their unique voice, or what it is that makes them unique, will make a difference in the world. That they have something to offer. Yeah. And that the world needs whatever that is.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Maddy. It's been brilliant having you.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Women with me, Ella Sims. If you like the show and want to know more, head to becomingwomen.com or follow me on Twitter or Instagram. I'd love it if you could rate and review this podcast or get in touch, as your comments on each episode mean so much to me.